There can't be many places in Russia as full of contrasts as Magnitogorsk. Around 1,000 kilometers from Moscow and deep in the Southern Urals, it's close to some of the country's best ski resorts, the base of one of its most successful sports teams, and home to nearly 500,000 people, none of whom seem able to keep still. But this city's whole history is tied up with one industry, and it's the reason why the locals call it the steel heart of Russia.
The compass needle's going a little bit crazy here because I'm at the top of Magnetic Mountain, the reason that Magnitogorsk was built and given its name. But I'm afraid to admit that I am actually cheating a little here because, as you can see, there's no mountain here anymore. It used to be full of this stuff, iron ore. But by the 1960s, all of it had been mined out to feed those huge steel mills you can see in the distance.
The factories stretch all across the left bank of the Ural River, meaning that walking from building to building just doesn't cut it.
Must be rather strange working in a place that's so big you need to take a car or even a train to get from one place to another.
It was below freezing outside, so I was just glad to be heading somewhere warm. But stepping through the doors of the blast furnace, there was a scene that wouldn't have been out of place in Dante's Inferno.
Welcome to hell.
Okay, so maybe I got a little carried away, and there didn't seem to be any souls in torment, unless you count the guys who have to shift iron ore into these 1500-degree ovens for 8 hours every day. But this is where the whole steel-making process begins, and they were looking for all the help they could get.
Unfortunately, you get nothing for free in this life, so the price of my tour of the factory is that I'm being put to work. But I do need some special equipment, so I've got my coat. Спасибо. So then I get the protective helmet and gloves. And I've got to sift some of this pig iron. Now, obviously, this is vital stuff. This river of fire, because it's heavy too. Without that, there's no steel at all.
Everything in this factory is done on a giant scale. The pig iron is mixed with tons of scrap steel and pure oxygen to create more molten steel. And all that takes place in yet another huge oven.
It's a really intense experience just being here. The heat coming off this furnace is incredible. The earth moves under your feet, there's the machine moving on. The noise, you can barely hear yourself think, and you have this fire and sparks shooting out everywhere. It's almost just like being in a Hollywood movie.
And just as in Tinseltown, you're looking at the latest gadgets and dealing with big money. Every month, the factories churn out more than 1 million tons of steel, and they rake in huge sums of cash. And to keep that kind of output going, it's hardly surprising they've got production lines like this.
Now, this building is actually around 1 kilometre wide, making it the longest steel rolling mill in the world. Now, if the blast furnaces were all about the fire, this place is all about the water. The huge steel strips come hurtling down here red hot. The jets of water cool them down, and they're made into these enormous steel coils, right down to the conveyor belt here.
Amazingly, for a factory that takes up practically half of Magnitogorsk, there are surprisingly few employees here. Vasily has seen the plant evolve over 20 years and says that the equipment they deal with now barely needs a human touch.
The whole process is automated. There is no manual labor. It doesn't take new staff long to learn what they must learn. The most important thing is to ensure the machines run continuously without interruption, and an automated system prevents such interruptions.
It means that not only is the factory able to churn out a massive volume of steel, but also to produce different types, including galvanized steel which won't rust, and, the most profitable of all, pre-colored steel. Well, would you want to get busy with a paintbrush on something this size?
molten metal to these colourful coils. That's the final stage of the steel making process. Now that's ready to become several new walls, fences, even a bunch of new cars. All that remains now is for these guys to finish packing it up, and then it's on its way either around Russia or anywhere else around the world.
It may have global reach, but the steelworks still invests heavily at home. It's behind various social programs in the city, and its logo is on the shirts of Magnitogorsk's favourite sons.
Oh, with weather like this, it's not difficult to tell what the most popular sport in this city is.
These are Metallurg Magnitogorsk, and they're one of the best ice hockey teams in Russia. They won the European Champions Cup in 2008, and, rather appropriately, they're nicknamed the Steels. Now, put me in front of a cricket match and I can explain all of the various 472 different laws to you. But all I know about hockey is that big men put on about 100 kilos of padding, whack a puck at each other, and occasionally try and knock each other's heads off. So, if I was going to understand this sport, I was going to have to get on the ice myself, with some very small teachers.
I suppose I should be grateful that they've not put me in with the big boys here, but I tell you what, playing with about 20 stars of the future when you've got no skates on is no picnic either. I reckon the future of Metallurg is pretty safe. Who needs skates?
The boys can train for free here, and it's a really popular programme. Their coach Boris has been involved with the sport for nearly 40 years.
These boys here have been around for 2 or 3 years, and there are also newcomers. Their aims are different. Some have come here just to have fun, but others want to achieve the status of some of our great stars. Time will tell who makes it.
One young man who really does get to learn from example is Maxim Bulin, the son of famous tough guy defenseman Vladislav Bulin. Now, it's lucky that Maxim scored 6 goals today, as his dad seems like the sort of man you really wouldn't want to disappoint.
Blimey. Oh, and that's about a tenth as strong as he normally does it. Tough sport.
It seemed pretty obvious that if I was going to make the most of Magnitogorsk, I needed to learn how to handle a pair of skates. So, later that evening, I headed to the city's open-air rink, with predictably humiliating results. But after a while, I was starting to get the hang of things, with the help of a friendly local girl called Katya. Although before I could start working on my triple lutzes, the sight of a television camera and the sound of a foreign voice had attracted a bit of a crowd.
I love you!
Well, good to see somebody appreciated my fancy footwork. My skating partner Katya offered to meet me for a drink the following day, and we headed to one of the city's most picturesque parks. She's lived in Magnitogorsk all her life, and says that things have changed here dramatically in the past few years.
It's difficult to get away from the fact that obviously half of the city is this huge steel plant, and I mean, if you read on the internet, you'd think that this was really one of the most polluted places on Earth, possibly. But you live here, I mean, how bad is it, or is it bad at all?
Articles on internet was right, but it's old information. The town becoming better for every year, and the administration of town and of metal steel works doing everything for becoming cleaner, becoming greener.
It was time for lunch, and we headed to Katya's favourite cafe to get out of the cold. And there were certainly quite a few unusual things on the menu.
1 hot chocolate tea, please. Okay.
Over my strangely tasty drink, Katya told me that although many of her friends have left the city for the bright lights of Moscow and St. Petersburg, she's determined to stay put.
You know, James, I think the best thing in our town is people, sexual people, who know about unusual things. We have the best rock culture in our region, really.
I wanted to see some of this rock culture in action, and Katja gave me an address for a gig that was going on that evening. So what would an underground music event be like in Magnitogorsk? Some hardcore punk? Speed metal? Well, actually more like Strictly Come Dancing 17th century style. I'd wandered into some sort of historical ball, which seemed to have attracted a range of film characters and courtly figures. And everyone was ready to party like it was 1699. The balls have been taking place here for a number of years, and according to my hostess Natalia, it's something that's really captured the imagination of young people around the region.
Natalia, everyone seems to be having a really good time this evening, but can you tell me sort of how you got involved in this style of dancing?
So I suppose it's not only the style of dancing, it's really the style of life. Here, really special people are gathered, and I was introduced into this style, into this stream, by a friend of mine. So, and it was really by chance. I think that the greatest things in life happen by chance. This movement is really in a full swing now. So more and more young people just choose this way of life.
I wasn't exactly dressed for it, but coming from a land of kings and queens, it seemed a shame not to at least try a courtly dance. And they assured me that no one could mess up a minuet that badly. I was really surprised by my evening at the ball, and especially by the fact that some of the participants had travelled hundreds of kilometres just to be here. But this is a city which seems to pride itself on bringing different people together. After all, I'd ended up dancing with a Japanese princess, and you get the feeling that this is a place where East really does meet West.